Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 419 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here. And this episode, I have been thinking about while this person was on their way to crushing a course record at the Leadville 100, smashing this record that was 20 years old. And I knew I wanted to interview him, and I was excited to interview him. But as always, I like to give the dust a little bit of time to settle so someone can really process. He has been on the podcast before, and I'm excited to welcome David Roche back to the podcast. David, you may know as a coach, as an athlete, as the host of the Some Work All Play podcast. Him and his wife, Megan, do so much within the running community, such a beam of optimism within the space that is often much needed. But actually with David, there was something interesting, or not interesting. There was something important in his story and his journey that happened this year that could have derailed everything. And you were going to hear about what happened earlier in the year for David and how he was able to turn that moment of really life-changing, of recognizing the delicate nature of life and move that towards what he was able to do at Leadville. We talked very openly about this conversation. I really enjoy the level of vulnerability and depth David was able to go into. And without any further ado, let's go chat to David. You've heard me talking about Tracksmith for years, 5 years to be exact, because those same items that I was given 5 years ago are still lasting the same, even though they've done hundreds of runs, thousands of miles. And recently they've been handling sweaty bike workouts, especially when I'm on the stationary trainer, as well as even swims. I've done a few swims in my items. The quality, the durability is lasting beautifully. And that is because Tracksmith takes so much pride in what they make. As I've mentioned before, the number one thing you can do environmentally when it comes to your running clothes is to buy high quality items that last. I am a big fan of many of the items that are bestsellers, including the Session Speed shorts. Those are my favorite shorts of all time. I love all the tanks. I really just love every one of them. I wear them almost every day. I'm wearing one of those tanks, as well as the Session short tights. You can go check those out. And I encourage you to use code TINANEW for $15 off your order of $75 or more. That's use code TINANEW, TINANEW at tracksmith.com to get yourself that special offer. Get yourself some quality items, make them last. You will be amazed with the quality, the durability, and they're going to look good too. Go check it out at tracksmith.com. David, welcome back to the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited to have you back here. Thanks for joining me.
This is so exciting. I think it's been 300 of your episodes since I've been on here, and I've had so much fun following your journey since. I love getting your emails, just reading about everything
you're going emails?
Through. Of course.
Well, thank you.
You have literally the best subject lines because every single time I'm like, Tina,
you're
talking
negative.
Right to me.
I know. You know, people comment on my subject lines all the time. They're like, every week it's like, I almost died, but, or like, you know, it's something very negative.
Oh, no. I love it because I'm getting a lot of political emails too. And I'm like, thank God this is Tina and not another email from like Doug Emhoff or something. It's like, I just need more Tina in my life right now.
Oh, well, thank you. That's nice to hear. And yeah, my subject lines are very, very extreme, but it's
gotta break through the noise. Break through the noise. No, I get it. Whenever I'm designing, a title for Some Work All Play, our podcast, I'm always like, these titles matter so much, and it's wild how much it matters.
I know.
And I wish I didn't have to play the game, but we're all playing it.
We are all playing the game, and unfortunately, that is the way it is. Although you, as of us recording this, you posted a picture this morning. Was it a day ago? I saw it this morning of a beautiful scene, but it was some fall trees, and I don't know if that falls in the algorithm's favorite things to see.
Oh, yeah.
But your words, I think, kind of saved you in that they were engaging. But I did think in the moment, I was like, ooh, we're going with a tree scene, which I love, but it isn't maybe what Instagram would recommend someone post. So I love that you managed to cut the noise and end up on my feed with your tree picture.
Well, Megan, she was making a comment to me that a lot of those aspen trees, as they're turning, have these notches in them. And if you look at the notches really fast, what does it look like but a butt? And so maybe that's how we harness the Instagram algorithm, is trees that look like butts. And we'll be on the front page, left and right. I know, I'll be clicking on it.
That is true. I mean, that's one way. So I guess maybe we can have people test out and see if aspens tend to be something that gets them more attention, and it can be a movement.
Putting the ass in aspen. I feel like your listeners who have no idea who I am are just like, what the fuck did I just wander into?
Well, you're giving a good sense of you to start off with, and I love it. And so speaking of that, we are going to spend a good chunk of time today talking about, as you have been talking a lot lately, because everyone was so in awe of your 15:26 course record at the Leadville 100, which, by the way, I, until this year, really didn't realize how, you are deeply embedded in the trail world. I would say I straddle the trail world and the road running world. But Leadville 100 is kind of known even with people that don't run. It's kind of amazing that it has the kind of legend and the popularity that it does, considering, it seems to me that it's up there in notoriety with the Chicagos and the New York marathons of the world, which is so cool.
Well, I mean, it's cool for me too, because when I first heard about trail running and first heard about running, really, I came into it not with the collegiate background or the high school background. And so I was reading blogs about the Leadville 100. And later on, it was the book Born to Run, and that everybody else read too. And so my imagination was captured in the same way. And it seemed totally unthinkable to me to ever consider anything like this. Like when I first read about Leadville in 2006, I was having trouble running a mile in New York City after I'd quit college football. And, it was just something that captured my imagination of people doing this in the mountains in the same way that track running captures my imagination, or football captures my imagination, like an amazing athlete of any type. And so it really was like when I decided that, maybe I am ready to try something like this, I wanted to do it at the place that really lit the fire for me way back in the day when it felt unthinkable. And so I think Leadville's that to a lot of people, in the sense of it's been around for a while. A lot of storytelling has happened about it. And so even though the race itself might not necessarily be have the competitive luster of some of the other races in trail running right now, that history and that legacy and that beauty of the natural world there is so overpoweringly motivating. And that's kind of what the energy I wanted to take into my first foray into this distance.
When did you first actively reflect on that piece that, you couldn't run a mile when you first thought of Leadville?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences there. So, it starts with that realization. But then even after I got into running, I did the Leadville Marathon. It was my first ever marathon, was a sister race of the Leadville 100 that's held a couple months before. And I DNF'd hard at mile 15. So, I have a lot of built up knowledge over time about the difficulty of this, the immensity of it, and just kind of a respect for the mountains. So to me, Leadville has never felt like a number on a piece of paper or a race to check off a box. It's felt like this wildly cool and basically impossible goal. And that's certainly how it felt earlier this year when I decided, you know what, that course record that everyone says is unbreakable from 20 years ago, maybe it is breakable, and maybe I could be the person to do it. And I had to go through the same process of everybody else of registering for the 50 miler to hopefully get a golden coin into the 100 if I won that race. And I was like, well, this is quite a way to structure a year, because if nothing else, I will not take this race lightly.
Wait, so that was the Silver Rush, the 50 mile?
Yeah. So
that was when you knew you were getting in it. Was that moment?
Yeah. So I had to race Silver Rush to get in, and I had to win, or at least in my head, I had to win to get in. And that was complicated because, the week of Silver Rush, I was down on Tuesday. So the race is on Saturday. I was down Tuesday on our bike downstairs because I do a lot of cross training. And Megan comes downstairs with a positive COVID test. And I tested positive for COVID too on race week. And it was so heartbreaking. One, because I really wanted to do the 50 miler just for its own sake. But two, I was like, I felt the 100 miler being taken from my grasp, and I got really lucky to have an asymptomatic case, and it was okay. And new COVID is a little different for some people than old COVID, which knocked me out fully. And this one seemed, but yeah, no. So I went the same path of everybody else of paying my, $500 or whatever it is to enter and get the joy of running over those mountains.
That is such a relief that that did work out that way, and it is one of those twist of fate moments where it could have gone one way or it could have gone another way. And having watched Ryan struggle his way through Western states with COVID, I saw the other direction of how it can go.
We might have gotten Ryan's COVID.
That's very true.
This was a few days after Western States, or it could have been Olympic trials COVID because I was coaching at the Olympic trials, and everyone is really close and no one's wearing masks for obvious reasons. They have to run really fast. And so I like to think it was Olympic trials COVID, and I got this COVID from someone that went on to win an Olympic gold medal. So it was super COVID that actually made me stronger and made everything possible.
I love that. Talk about reframing. That is a beautiful example of reframing. Okay, so this race obviously meant a lot to you. You had this, small town of Leadville. Absolutely, I felt the same thing when I went in 2023 of seeing I get why everyone is infatuated with this race. And I do also find it interesting. I'm sure you've seen this video, but Billy Yang's video, The Why, was until about a year ago was the only thing that actually made me believe that I could run 100 miles. It wasn't, and I say this to Ryan, I'll say it to you, what the top level elites do still kind of is unfathomable. Even to me, yes, I know I have more talent than the average person, but still it seems unfathomable. But seeing Billy struggle his way through, or, this year I had Dan Churchill is a good friend of mine, Matt Choi is a good friend of mine, seeing them struggle their way through that, it really is amazing to see the video evidence of what you can push your way through from people who are not at the front.
It's still unfathomable to me. I feel like I really need to drill that home with people first, this is my first 100 miler.
Yeah.
And it's not like I had a ton of success moving up in distance. I always say my physiology is geared to a mile, and my fatigue resistance is poor. I mean, we have a lot of coaching data on this. And my first 100K that I stepped up to was just last year. And I suffered so bad, and it was so wild. And I was so proud of myself for finishing. And something fundamentally changed in my physiology after that, where I realized that this thing that people call the pain cave is not pain. It's not about discomfort. It's about accepting that if you just keep moving forward and love that space, learn to accept that space, everybody can do this stuff. And it's open to everybody. And so when I stepped at the 100, I was so intimidated of this and reminded of being a kid and being 20 years old and driving from the town of Leadville through to Twin Lakes on the way to Aspen. And Twin Lakes is at mile 37 of the race, and thinking, how do people run this far? As of a year ago, I had never run that far in my life, even to Twin Lakes, let alone all the way there and back. And the cool thing about actually stepping up and doing one of these is you learn what the founder of Leadville, Ken Trubler or whatever, says, is that your body's capable of so much more than you could ever know. And for me, I found so much solace in the fact that everyone else is out there doing it. So like you, I never look at the pros, even the pros I coach, as the people whose experiences I want to emulate. What I like to look at is the people that are struggling to find cutoffs, because that to me is exactly the same experience I'm out there for. Like I'm signed up for this 100 specifically because it's going to tear me down to bones and gristle, tear away all the artifice. And then I get to see, what am I really capable of out there? That's what I wanted. I wanted that rough experience. And sometimes you just got to tear off the Band-Aid and go for it.
And do you feel like you got to that point?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't think you can do 100 miles without it. I mean, I was fortunate in that it happened late. And when it did, it was like I was in a really good emotional place. But that was the whole goal. Like, you know, before the race, I called my shot a little bit on this course record. But the day before the race, I posted something on Instagram that was just about, I am here for the pain cave. I don't care if it comes at mile 20 or mile 80. I'm here for it. And so emotionally, when I did get there, I was so happy to feel it. And for me, it was like the last 10 miles where I was holding back a little bit of, just my stomach was quite full at that point from a pretty epic fueling experience that I had out there. And I was just like, just hold it to the finish. And I held it to the finish for like 10 minutes after. But, that was the part I wanted, and I got it in spades. And especially after I had a bad bike accident early in the year, like getting to experience that on my own volition and not because a car turned into my path when I was biking, it was so empowering and empowering in a way that no matter what happens the rest of my athletic career, I'll always remember that moment. And even if the result didn't happen like it was, like that to me coming after the accident just gives me chills thinking about it now.
Did you hear the exciting news that Precision Fuel and Hydration is now the nutrition sponsor of California International Marathon, CIM? That's where I ran my PR. I love that race, and I know so many of you do too, and now they are working together. It is a dream for me. I am so excited to see it and hear about it. Now, with Precision, I've been talking about them for a long time with you. I've told you how their gels, you don't get the flavor fatigue because they have this very neutral flavor, the original that is. And then the mint and lemon is very like palate cleansing. Mint is also really good for you to have during a struggle part of a race. And it tastes really good, especially the two together is a very refreshing mix when you have those chews. So I've told you about my love for the chews and the gels and how easy they go down. It is not a kind of uncomfortable taking it down. I really do enjoy them. And also the hydration. I love their pH 1000 that I use every day in my drinks to make sure I am topped up with electrolytes. And as I am getting back into training, I'm excited that I'm using more of these again and I can get back into training so that I can have my next race be fueled by Precision and make sure that I can knock it out of the park because they really get it. And if you don't know how much of each thing you should be taking, how many carbs, how many gels, how much electrolytes, they have a free fuel and hydration planner that can figure it all out for you. Absolutely free. You can also have a free 20-minute consultation if you like. There's lots of links in the show notes, but I would encourage you to go to precisionfuelandhydration.com/Tina. That's going to give you a 15% discount code. You can also use code Tina sent me. Go check it out, precisionfuelandhydration.com/Tina, or use code Tina sent me to get 15% off, and go check out that fuel and hydration planner. Well, okay, so let's do that and go back a little bit. You have kind of given us some insights into your past and stepping up to this point and getting to the point where you were ready to take on 100. And I appreciate what you said there for listeners to hear about, a year ago, 37 miles was not something you were doing or had done. And I remember first interviewing Claire Gallagher after she'd won Western States. And her saying to me that she didn't run more than maybe 30 miles, I can't remember. Yeah. And me being like, what? What do you mean that's your longest run? Like how is that possible? Like it exploded my mind that because I came from the marathon world where you would run almost the whole distance. And so it's really good for people to hear how exactly what you said, what your body is capable of more than you think. And you may be closer to this than you realize, to being able to do this. So I want to
jump on that real quick. I think a road marathon is probably harder than a 100-miler. I know that's a wildly aggressive statement to make, but realistically, a 100-miler just biochemically cannot hurt. like in the traditional way. Like it gets hard, but it gets hard in this pain cave way, this way that can be so interesting and like a self-exploration. A marathon is really, you're riding the line of performance in a way that's quite different. And the training for it is often really marginally more difficult, in my opinion, like because you're on the margins of human performance. And so, I think what's so cool about this sport is that there's all of these different options for self-exploration. So, I love that you mentioned Claire. She gave me some of the best advice I got before Leadville. So I've coached Claire to win this race, and there's a reason our training sounds similar. It's because, we do similar things. And she's just like, David, keep your energy for yourself out there. This is a different experience. Like, I'm known to tell everyone they're awesome and all these things. She's like, later on in the race, you go inward, you focus on yourself, and just know that that's part of the journey that you need to embrace for this. And so Claire became the coachee, became the coach. And I thought about that so much out there.
And I know that you broke that rule one time, at least, to celebrate both of our dear friends, Zoe Rome.
Yeah.
But other than that, how many athletes did you have out there with you?
A few. So Ryan Sullivan, who ended up being fourth, and then Zoe second. And then that was basically it. Not too many more others. And then a couple people that were
have the temptation.
Yeah. And I was still doing it until the end. Basically, after I picked up my pacer at mile 62, I was like, all right, Teddy Bross, you can be the one to tell people they're awesome. I'm going to focus on the ground in front of me.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. And I'm sure Zoe has told you this, but the next morning we went down to the finish area, and she just said how energizing and how much that meant to her, that you had taken that moment when you were should have been focusing on your own race, to give her like a few words of advice. So even though you did take that moment to be there for her, it meant so much to her in that moment. So I'm glad you did.
Let's contextualize my advice, because I think one of the things I said to her was, and this is on Hope Pass, which for those that don't know the Leadville course, 37 miles of it is just nice running to Twin Lakes, that part I talked about. But then from Twin Lakes over Hope Pass is just a big old mountain, like a really steep, high altitude mountain. And so I'm coming up, she's coming down. And I think I said something like, you can drink from the streams. We will deal with any problems later. Because it was quite hot at that time of day. And I wanted her to know that whatever they tell you about streams doesn't apply in your 100-miler. It's like, Giardia is worth it if you're going for, in her case, second place at Leadville.
Yeah. She didn't tell me that was what you said to her. That's funny.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So getting back to you. Well, firstly, before we go back to the bike accident, on the note of what you were saying there, as a coach, as someone who has many athletes, who's worked with many different athletes, were there things in that 100-miler, you said about Claire giving you some advice, but were there other things that maybe you had seen or mistakes athletes had made that you were able to take into that moment and, use yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why when people talk about, in the pantheon of debut 100s, like this type of thing doesn't happen, I'm like, well, it's a different situation, because I've gotten to learn from athletes for so many years, not even as a coach, just as a friend. Like, seeing athletes like Claire win Western States teaches me so much, but it really goes beyond the 100-mile distance where, I think at this point we understand the intensity zones, the science behind it about as well as anyone ever could. And we have so much data behind the scenes. And yes, I applied that stuff. But for me, it's more about understanding kind of the mental, physical component. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it's not even about hundreds, though that helps. It's about seeing athletes go through these experiences that seem so daunting. Just in the same way this 100 felt to me, and how they cope with it, how they deal with it, how they find humor and joy and purpose in that process. So as we're recording this, I'm getting back from the track where I was pacing Ali Ostrander in a track workout. And this summer, I got to pace her for a lot of her workouts as she was training for the Olympic trials. And, we would do some sessions that I would write them down and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Hallie. This is going to be just painful, as it only can be when you're training for a 3K steeple on the track. Uh-huh. And to be there and pace her through them and see her go into this space where, you're delving into a part of human existence that only athletes understand, and all athletes of all levels understand exactly this feeling. and how she dealt with it emotionally, going through the ups and downs of this training block. It's like, that's exactly what I'm calling on. So I think the benefit of being a coach is partially that you get to experience lives alongside others in a way that gives you wisdom. And if you're empathetic enough, you can then apply that wisdom to yourself. So just like I was carrying Claire out there, I was carrying Allie out there, and, Megan, as she goes through labor, and all of these other, and then Megan, as she's won a million national championships. So like my wife, Megan, for the listeners that don't know. And basically, over time I've learned, well, I don't need to be the one that's the first to experience this. I get the joy of seeing athletes experience this and come out the other end stronger. And if I just lean into that a little bit, then I can call on their strength, not just my own.
And did you know that with, those final miles where you said you were really, where it was really, you were struggling to get there, to just continue going? Were you able to remind yourself in that moment, because you'd maybe seen other athletes do it, that even though you were hurting and 10 miles seems like a long way to be struggling your way through, that you could get there and it was possible? And like you said, you were trying not to throw up, but you managed to hold it not only to the finish line, but you seemed so coherent at the finish line and just like so totally with it. And then obviously it hit you. So
it was so fun. I mean, even when I talk about Pancake, like I was enjoying it so much, and when I could talk, I was just making the best jokes. I wish we had that recorded. I think what Megan always says in these types of contexts is left foot, right foot. And if ultras have a metaphor for life, it's just that, sometimes if you just keep moving forward, you can get through just about anything. And the coolest thing about left foot, right foot is that's life, and you can have so much fun in the process too. And so my hope is that when I get back out there and I'm able to do something like this again, and I crash and burn, like, because that's coming, right? Like this is I captured lightning in a bottle. Maybe I'm going to have a great day like this again, but I'm never going to be able to set the Leadville course record again. Like that's just like a once in a lifetime thing. It's like when it crashes and burns, can I also left foot, right foot my way to a place of, toughness? And for me, toughness manifests in finding the little joy in that. For others, it might be toughness might look a lot different, but for me, like silliness and lightness is my manifestation of being a tough motherfucker. And that's what I wanted to show in that 100, because, it wasn't just the accident we went through. We also went through online social media, really, really frustrating things earlier this year. And you combine those two, and what I wanted to display, like, I didn't care about my result really. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, the people that love me are going to love me, and the people that don't like me are going to say the same dumb shit online. What meant a lot to me is being like, I'm out here with this, scar over top of my nose, and I have a big smile on my face. And what that scar says is that this tough motherfucker can also smile through this shit that everybody else in this sport understands. And so, I think that that's the coolest part about running sometimes, is not that the results of it. It's just that runners and athletes in general get to put themselves in situations that draw home that impermanence of our physical nature, the amount that all of this is a choice. And if you can make that choice and left foot, right foot your way through it, what can't you do in life? And so that's what I was calling on during the race.
Well, and this is very interesting because this is something I've thought about a lot. Again, I'm coming from the marathon world, and it is very much, as you said, you're kind of straddling the line of what is physically, humanly possible for you. And for me, I personally have no desire to go back to that kind of running, just because of the I don't know, this maybe someday, but not right now. But that said, in the marathon world, I feel like, and I actually would love to ask Allie about this as well. I know she's not primarily a marathoner, but it's the same with, the events she does. It's kind of the messaging put out there is almost like head down, grit your teeth, eyes ahead, block out the rest. And it seems like everything you are about. And I watched you at May Queen, what was that, mile 88, 89? I watched you not only like cohesively talk to Megan and either your parents or her parents, whoever was there, but you also, my jaw was on the ground when you like fist bumped Leo, and you were like, I was like, how is he that coherent to like engage with his child in this moment? I feel like I would be just in a different world. And so you displayed that like at that mile when, you were so close to the finish. But yeah, I feel like so many races, and maybe it's in the ultra world too, but particularly in the marathon world, toughness people think of is like grit, tense, angry. I'm going to beat you. And it's, you're just the opposite of that. And I love it. So yeah, talk through, have you ever tried that method and, why you decided to switch to what you have now, if that's the case.
That's just, I think that a lot of that comes from a place of insecurity, and I think that we're all feeling that. And it's tied to the same stuff that we're all insecure about, like our bodies, our role in the universe, the fact that we all die. Like, I mean, if you really go down to it. And for me, like the way I try to come out of those questions, because I think it's the right answer for the most part, is that, look, we're all in this together. Even the people that say those mean things about me or whatever, we're all in this together. We should try to spread and share as much love as possible. Find the silliness in the cosmic joke of it all. And hundreds make that pretty easy because it is all kind of hilarious, right? Like that we're doing this at all is such a weird thing to do. But it's also so beautiful. On the track, meanwhile, I think there's this pipeline that goes from high school to college to post-collegiate. And there is such a hyper focus and it is so intense that my goal as a coach, getting to coach out people like Allie and Anna Gibson and stuff, is to come into that sport and be like, no, this is also silly and fun. And if it's not fun, we should change our approach to make it fun. And so Allie and I were joking today that during the workouts, and Allie has all these on her YouTube. Everybody should go check it out. It's incredible.
Yes, definitely.
But when we first started doing this, where I would go pace her, like, I think there was a little bit of resistance because she had never had a coach that was like making jokes during workouts, and we're trying to have actually a good time. Right.
Yeah.
And now it's like all of her breakthrough workouts are the ones we're doing together, because I think, part of it is just, that self-judgment part. Obviously, performance matters, especially for a professional athlete, but the self-judgment doesn't matter. Like, that's the type of thing that hopefully over time we can learn. Athletics are a path to self-acceptance. And for a lot of personalities, not all, self-acceptance is best experienced via laughter, or at least a lightness about you. Like, the sport is heavy enough. Athletics and life and existence are heavy enough without us adding to it. And so on her last interval today, she did 6x4 in 68 here at altitude, which is, really strong. Yeah. And then backed it up with 2 by mile at like 5 minute, just over 5 minute. And on the last mile, I just said something really dumb, 100 meters into the rep, which is, you know what they say, 1/16 of the way through the interval, it's already done, or something like that. And obviously that would be really annoying, but my purpose for that was not to make a joke, but to just remind her, it's like, relax, like this is okay. And basically, I think all of running in particular can be held a little bit lighter, because if you're anything like me out there, like, you're putting enough pressure on yourself at baseline without having more added. And all the studies on performance also show that we perform our best when our internal monologues are uplifting and lighter. And the burn the boats, like intensity approach, like that doesn't do it. That the tighter you hold on, the more that egg of self-worth is ready to break. At least for a person like me.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. And since that time I did run marathons, I've really learned how much better I feel, how much more I enjoy it. And I hope this next stage, once I get back from my recovery, will be all about that. And actually, you'll kind of, this goes along the lines of what you're saying, but I've done, at this point of recording, I think I've done like 6 runs. And I'm so very much in the early stages. But one of the things that I have realized is important to me is one thing I like to do when I'm running is like gracing my hands along trees, just feeling the bark. It's a very grounding thing for me. In my only ultra, I did the 50 mile at Bryce Canyon. I would just graze my hand along the tree anytime I was struggling or just needed that reminder of why I was doing this or was taking it too seriously or whatever. And, Ryan Montgomery commented at the time behind me as my pacer, like, I love that you are, touching these trees, engaging, because I know nature means so much to you. And in this recovery period, there's that temptation to be like, oh, I'm not going to touch tree because I don't want to put a single step wrong. But then I am so aware that without that, I'm losing a piece of what running is to me, which is connecting to nature. And so even if it means I have to kind of verge my steps slightly to move to one side of the path to touch a tree, to me, that is worth it. Even if maybe that puts my recovery journey back a day or two, because that's the reality of the situation. But that's what keeps my running light and meaningful to me. And so I think that's such an important point you bring up of finding what it is in you that keeps it light and keeps it meaningful beyond I'm doing this because of my self-worth.
Yeah.
So,
I love the tree thing. I mean, I guess the problem, and I've always thought about this as a coach too, via my own brain and how I view my own athletics, is that at some level, all of our brains know that this is silly in the same way that we're going to know our jobs are silly. Maybe one day we'll even realize that like, oh, all of the striving is quite silly, but the frivolity is the point. And that's always what I want to try to anchor it in. It's like, yes, we are so serious about this, but that is part of the point. Like that is part of what allows it it's like this very serious nature, but with a wink at the background. And then it's that wink that gives us our ultimate powers to achieve great things. Because I mean, there are people out there that can just stay hyper intensely focused for a long period of time. That is not me. That is not most of the athletes I have dealt with, but a lot of the athletes I've dealt with try to emulate those, people that might have been gifted with a brain that's able to compartmentalize in ways mine cannot. And so with that, it's like, yeah, whatever your version of touching the tree is, you got to fucking do it. Like otherwise part of your brain is going to be silently screaming the entire running journey. Why the fuck am I doing this? And I think that the why the fuck am I doing this question is basically the entire point of running. Like, because by answering that question and coming to some sort of conclusion that is satisfying and gives you day-to-day purpose, like you actually are the person that gets to live so many lives and experience so much while you're here. But I think like there's one path through that, and that is existential crisis. And that's why every runner you've ever seen that is talking at all in a philosophical way, they're essentially saying, dude, I have had some fucked up mental health journeys with my athletics and I've come out the other end. And so I'm no different there.
Hi friends, you have heard me talking about Runner, the #1 rated running coaching app in the world with over 20,000 5-star reviews. They are loved, and it is easy to see why. They are on a mission to make running as easy, effective, and enjoyable as possible. And they do this through creating personalized running plans for runners of all abilities. So yes, that is to you too. Even if you think you are not good enough for a coach, not fast enough for a coach, you too, this is speaking to you. They have runners who are beginning their journeys as a couch to 5K runner, all the way to elite marathoners. All of the plans are built by Olympic athletes and expert coaches. In addition, they also have strength and conditioning plans that are running specific and full body. They have integrated mobility and Pilates for you to be able to do. It'll sync with your calendar. And most important, or maybe not most important, but my favorite part is that you can connect with like-minded runners in the community section to find people to support you and work with you along during your training plan. Also, now Runner has an AI feature that adapts your real workout data, providing pace recommendations based on your performance. You can complete your sessions and choose to accept or reject pace adjustments as it determines them from your training. It is such an exciting time to be able to be using this app, and they are working really hard to make all runners feel like they can reach their best. And now I am starting to run more again. I'm so excited to be able to use a runner plan myself so we can go into this together. So that said, as a friend of mine, you can get 2 weeks for free by being a friend of mine and downloading that Runner app. You can use code RUNNINGFORREAL to get yourself 2 weeks for free. So go use code RUNNINGFORREAL when you download Runner to your phone. Let's do it. Yeah, I got stuck for a minute, I'll be honest, with you... Zoe and I quoted you in our book, Becoming a Sustainable Runner, about the why, but it was not why the fuck am I doing this? It was just why am I doing So I feel like I've been cheated out of the correct answer there, or
exactly
what you actually said.
Well, I feel like that book was written 6 years ago, and I've grown. My F words have flourished as we got our own podcast. I've just realized the more you curse, the more emphatic everything comes out. It just comes out so much better.
It does.
When we first started our podcast, there were people that were like, "Why are you saying curse words? Like, this makes it," and I'm like, they're words. What are you so worried about it for? Think about your societal programming, man. Because it was always men. And I'm like, yeah. So I just think it makes life a little bit more fun sometimes. Makes life a little more fucking fun sometimes.
So is there going to be another edition of the Happy Runner called the Happy Fucking Runner?
There better be now. Yeah, after Leadville, I feel like, one interesting part about Leadville actually is that I didn't know this before the race. It is a really big race in the like hybrid athlete community, like the athletes that do weightlifting and running and like social media influencing and all of this. And so like those athletes, I think, would be really about the Happy Fucking Runner. The ones that are like also bench pressing 400 pounds as they run on mountains.
Yeah, no, they, yeah. Well, maybe I'll send it some of their way and see if although you might have to add the swear word in there because that might be more appealing to them.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We got to make sure.
That. Yes.
Yeah. This thing.
Got it.
And not just runner. Like we need to have someone doing major back squats on the cover.
Yeah, not a smile. Yes. Okay. I want to go backwards to April. You have shared the story a lot, so I don't want to make you go into detail again. But while there's so many reasons, there's so many reasons that happened. There's so many things you learned from that experience. It also, for me, that was when I had my surgery and was going into biking season. It was a real reminder for me of like, sometimes as athletes, we can get, at least I can, with cars when they're being like douchey towards me, I can be like, oh, I'm going to get round you or whatever. It really has been kind of that stop thing of like, it is not worth it, or trying to cross a light quickly before the light goes. Do you want to share like a base level of what happened? And I want to go into some of the like after pieces of that.
Yeah. So cycling became a lot bigger part of my journey this year in general. And I had finally gotten my dream bike. After all these years, I had been riding on the shittiest little bikes forever. And I got that bike and got it way like price reduced. I was so happy. This was probably my fourth ride on this bike. And I'm out here on Boulder.
Was that new?
It was that new. And I'm out here in Boulder on Nelson Road, which tons of people ride. Nice straight shot, nice big shoulder, just riding straight. And a car did not see me at all for whatever reason. Made a left turn into my path. I didn't see it till the very end. And then a lot of what comes next is just from police reports and things where I tried to swerve out of the way of the car. It must have hit my back wheel or some part of the back of my bike. And I got launched 100 feet in the air, which I think was an exaggeration, but everything says that. So into a fence, and got very lucky in the sense that had a head injury and some broken bones, but survived. Came to in the ambulance a half hour later. And, from there, like the bike was broken in half. Maybe that was the saddest part of the whole thing. But,
a bunch of in there, right? Of you dream, you always want the perfect bike, and the perfect bike is maybe not what you need.
Exactly. And maybe this is the bike that protected me for whatever reason. I think one of the more interesting things that connects it to Leadville is the week before the race, as we're going through the insurance process, we got the body cam footage of the first responder. And to give a perspective on how serious this accident must have looked from the outside is 3 fire departments responded to this. So like they probably weren't expecting to see someone that was doing pretty okay in the big scheme of things. And the body cam footage showed me down in the ditch, and I must have been just...
So you watched this?
Yeah. Just a nice
Did you
video.
watch it with Megan first, or did she watch it and then you watched it, or you were just like, let's just do it?
My dad watched it, and my dad is like, he's the original Coach Roche. He's very much like me in that he's the one that taught me to try to find like joy and humor and everything. And so he's like, check this out. This is epic. And so and I'm lucky in the fact that like maybe because I got knocked out at the right time, the PTSD elements of it weren't a big deal for me. And it probably could have been with just a slightly different context, but I got fortunate. And so as I'm watching this body cam footage, and Megan did veto putting it online. I wanted to because I thought it was pretty funny. I'm lying there in the ditch, and I don't remember this, but covered in blood everywhere. And the policeman's looking over at me, and I'm just like, "Is my wife okay? I think she was riding with me. Is she okay?" And he's like, no, she wasn't riding with you. She's probably fine. We think she's fine. And then like 10 seconds later, as head injury patients do, I just ask again. It's like, wait, can you just confirm for me really quickly that my wife's okay? That's all I care about. And it's just a good reminder that like, at the end of the day, that it's super fortunate that like, came out of it okay. The driver, I hope, like it wasn't intentional, right? Like they did not see me. This could happen to any of us. This was an older driver. They were not texting or anything like that. And, I was able to connect with them and just say, look, I love you, wish you love, like, so sorry. Do not spend another, they're 89 years old. Do not spend another moment worried about this. And, if like the aftermath of the accident was essentially the long road to recovery that happens, especially with head injuries where like my mental health was not great for me for a while. I was just reminded of Bo Burnham's amazing Netflix special Inside, where it's all about mental health. And I listened to that so many times in my recovery where he's like, I feel like shit, big old massive sack of shit. Because that's how I felt. And, but coming out the other end, like I was able to open up a little bit about the mental health part of it on our podcast and think about this stuff a little bit more deeply. And, it drew me home to the impermanence of it all. And you combine it all, and like, I was able to ground myself in the gratitude because I was very lucky that in the end of it, and get back on the bike relatively quickly and get back out there and then eventually get back to running. And, we can never know exactly. I never want to say like, oh, an accident was important because, there are people that go through trauma where there is no silver lining. But I do think that there is something about these types of things leading to breakthroughs that we don't fully understand. And, on the way to Leadville, seeing that body cam footage the week before, I was like, all right, I'm doing this for the part of me that never left that ditch. And there's definitely a part of me that never left that ditch. I know that. I feel that even now my brain is not where it was. But I was out there to experience the pain cave for that part of me, like that bit that was left on the fence.
When you were running Leadville, was that something you thought about of like, I didn't go through all this for nothing? Or did you kind of compartmentalize the accident during the race itself?
No, didn't think about it. I mean, my thing with racing is like your brain goes to a million different places. And I just wanted to hopefully channel like love the entire time. Like that for me is my performance enhancing emotion, and like love, not just for like the activity, but for everybody out there, for the existence of the race. And so maybe that like the accident helped me do that in a way that I was never able to do in the old days in these long events. Like, who knows? But yeah, it definitely, it never was specifically on my mind until the week after when, I was reflecting on the part of me that never left the ditch. Like that, I didn't really think about it that way until after the accident or after the race, because, I definitely feel like I lost a couple more IQ points in that process. And, like seriously. And it's just like, so when I thought about that, that's when I was like, yeah, God bless the broken road,
Yeah. It is, one thing that I really found, I mean, you said that maybe you got knocked out at the right time, so the PTSD maybe wasn't as much as it could have been, but you were very intentional to go back to the site pretty quickly. You were very intentional to ride your bike over the site. Why was that so important to you? And was that a scary thing for you to do at the time, or was it somewhat of, you got that relatively easily to go through that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard. I read as much as I could about PTSD literature in the past for athletes that I've coached that have gone through traumatic accidents or, traumatic assaults or things like that, and just to support them as best I could as a coach, and talked to mental health experts in this process. And everything basically that I read is that if you don't have a specific traumatic memory of an incident that you're worried about triggering directly, regaining your agency over it is pretty important. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. But maybe because mine didn't seem as severe for me, it was important to get back out there, especially because as I felt like I was losing control in the weeks after, it was not improving as fast as I was hoping. My optimism about things was kind of shattered pretty quickly. It was just so important for me to be like, this is my thing. I'm not giving this up. Yes, tragedy could happen, but tragedy could happen anytime. Was just incredibly important to actually feeling like this accident wouldn't control any part of me in the future. And so, yeah, I think it was 19 or 20 days later, I was able to bike in a sling and, just with my hand perched up there to get back past the accident and finish the ride I started. And that for me, I still shudder when cars pass every time, but maybe that's a thing all cyclists feel to a certain extent. And, I basically there might still be processing that needs to happen, but Leadville seemed like a major step in that processing of being all right, you don't control so much in life. All of this is an act of radical vulnerability. And in acts of radical vulnerability, sometimes it's not going to turn out great, whether that's something that you control or something you don't. And so lean into it as hard as you can. And, understand that you just need to lean on your support system too, right? This is not a personal journey. And it wasn't for me until I, on our podcast, talked about how much I felt like my mental health had been affected months later that I felt a lot of the burden finally resolve.
And the mental side of concussions is something that really doesn't get talked about very often, considering how damaging it can be. And friends who have had severe concussions and have struggled mentally for 6-9 months post head injury, and it can be absolutely debilitating. But for you in particular, as someone who is known as this optimist, this very positive guy, was there an additional layer of kind of almost wanting to access that part of you, but being unable to?
When I'm with other people or coaching or whatever, that's a time when I actually feel relatively unburdened in that. Because maybe it becomes a part of the origin point of all of this, that the reason hopefully I'm known as an optimistic guy or whatever and positive, sometimes in the past, even this year, that has been used to insult me in ways that are just public and serious and also so simplistic and dumb when you really delve down to it. Because the reason I try to be like this, it is not a baseline setting, right? I'm the introverted, self-doubting kid still that was the heaviest in my class and all that stuff. It's that I felt this deep uncertainty about existence from a very young age. And I read all these books about life and death and all of this stuff. And from there, I was well, other people are probably scared just like I am. And, maybe a way to make it less scary for them and also lift myself up a little bit is to try to be that light just slightly. And I've come to peace with the fact that people are going to view it as being simplistic. But I'm fine with that, people that know me know that that's not the case. And with the accident, kind of just confirms my priors that we all die. It's all impermanent. Shit's going to hell in a handbasket. And not in a bad way, in a way that that's just what happens when you zoom out far enough. And that's beauty, right? Impermanence is beauty, but also to me, it makes me want to double down on those things. The hard part for me was that my self monologue wasn't saying those things about myself. It was saying it about others the whole time. It was just much more turning having more trouble finding the joy in the day-to-day process of life. The part I remember very is eating a piece of pepperoni pizza and being oh yeah, whatever, which is the opposite of how I want to approach life. I want to try to embrace those little things, right? Because that's all that we have. And I was oh fuck, I probably need to get help and talk about this more.
And so was that that in that moment, was that where you decided that you were going to do something about it, or did it take a few more weeks before you kind of really spoke about it, approached it, addressed it?
That's when I started talking about it with Megan and then on the podcast, because over time you have a podcast, you just know that it becomes your, you trust the people that are there and listen to it. And it is your people, your community, in ways that other mediums just aren't. And once I did that, it's amazing how quickly things resolved. Yeah. And talking to mental health experts helps, but for me, it's just owning it. Like, I need to wear things on my sleeve in the open for them to fully, I need to work through things in public. It's just how
I'm the same way.
I am. And so as soon as I did that, it definitely helped. And it would be too much of a coincidence for Leadville, which in the context of my career, I've had good races, but there's a reason that after the fact, I read commentators saying oh, this is unthinkable, right? Of someone should only happen by the very best of all time. And I'm like, well, if they're right, which, who am I to say they're not, I'd be remiss to say maybe it is connected to the accident in ways I can't even understand, and maybe it's partially not I'm centering on the emotional side of it, but maybe it's also physical, in the sense that sometimes you need these schisms in your physical process to have whatever grows back fully express itself. And so you think about the meteor that hits Earth 65 million years ago. If that never happened, humans would never be around, right? There are little mammals underneath the surface that happened to not get hit by that first blast because they were under the surface. Evolution allowed them to open up, and those little things then expressed fully. And, maybe there were synonyms for that in my physiology that needed this accident to express fully. And I think all layoffs can be viewed that way, in some way.
And so during the training period, once you could run, there's a video of you running in a sling. Was that 15 days later, 16?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel a need to kind of catch back up, or were you able to embrace the process with what what your body gave you on that day?
Oh, I needed to catch back up. Yeah. I feel like no athlete, and this is always something I try to remember as a coach too, is that no athlete is where they reach because they're fully chill about it, right? That's not something I would want or expect from an athlete, and nor do I want or expect it from myself. I just try to lean into the health element. It's is this a thing that is productive or neutral for your overall health? If it is, you can have fun with it. We can explore the limits or even take some slight risks. But on the flip side, you don't want compulsive behavior that leads down negative pathways. So for me, it's I'm playing catch up. I do this sport because I enjoy pushing the boulder up the hill, and I want to keep pushing and I want to keep pushing. And the boulder's heavier right now and my pushes are lighter, but I still want to do the littlest little push because that's what I've been doing for 18 years. And so, I was playing catch up, but like every athlete feels, is that once the body's ready, things start clicking into pace so much faster than you would expect. It just sometimes takes the body longer to get ready. And that's the place where you just need to give it space. And so I gave it the space it needed, and it was nonlinear. But once things did start to click, I suddenly was pacing Allie in track workouts, during the track season, thinking, oh, well, I'm pacing now because I'm not quite ready for my own sessions. And I finished those sessions being oh shit, we just did 12 by 466 and my heart rate didn't get above this number or whatever. And then I'm wow, maybe I am farther along, and then I started to have these realizations that maybe this goal that I had set earlier in the year, was still on the table. And
so you had kind of put it aside at that point. Oh
yeah. No, I was I don't know when I'm going to be back. I'm not even thinking about racing right now, just try to survive, because this all layers in on what a year. Megan's big race was at the end of April and after my accident in early April. And we found out the 2 days before her big race that she got a positive pregnancy test. She came downstairs, much like the positive COVID test later, and showed me a positive pregnancy test. And so, life was just totally different than we expected. And I was just like, all right, well, let's see what happens here. But I didn't think racing was at all a possibility. And then Megan was like, David, like, you're ready for this, you know? And so every time I doubted myself along the way, Megan came in as my coach, as hopefully the type of person I am for others, but then, you know, multiplied by a million because she's also my wife, saying like, no, you can do this. And it's like, no, you can go race the 50 miler. Then you can get this course record when I was doubting it at the end. And she kept being that person that gave me the tailwind because, you know, even though I'm that for other people, I'm not that for myself at baseline, right? That's not me. And for the same reason I tell other people they're awesome, sometimes I need someone to come in and give me that too.
Yeah, no. And it was so evident getting to see that out on race day, just the relationship that you two have, the respect, the cheerleading that she did for you. It was really cool to get a front row seat to that during that pivotal point for you. So
it's so cool that you were there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was glad to be there, and yeah, the finish to kind of witness that, you know, from the stands too. Okay, so then I kind of want to wrap here with, for someone listening to this, yes, I'm speaking to myself, but also for someone who is listening to this, and maybe they're in a period of time where they feel like things keep going wrong or things aren't clicking. You clearly, that became an example of, I'm going to keep trying, as you said, I'm going to keep pushing that boulder up that hill, even if it's the tiniest movement that I get in this moment. What would you like to remind people in terms of embracing the journey, but keeping joy at the center, even if you have something that you really want on the horizon and it's not looking good, but you still want it?
Well, I think the athletic journey, by definition, is nonlinear in every single respect. And it's only after the fact that we smooth out the narratives, much like I've done on this podcast about myself. It is so much more up and downs, day to day, month to month, year to year. But that's the whole point of being this bones and gristle and pushing it through this adaptation framework that we barely understand, and the types of things that cause those adaptations. You know, you see this in other sports, like if we're talking about a baseball player or a football player going through these ups and downs in their careers, and then we don't give ourselves those same graces to understand that on the adaptation framework, you're looking at this spectrum on which one side could be injury, and then on the other side could be overreaching, and then in the middle you have adaptation. So you're always just playing with these variables, pulling little strings to find where that adaptation framework can lie. And if you aren't having setbacks, you are not actually playing the game. You are playing some sort of video game with cheat codes, or you are a lucky motherfucker. And the nature of it is like, if I see an athlete that I'm like, we've spent a year and they haven't had any setbacks of any type, I am not being a good coach because I'm clearly not exploring the limits of that person, that exact athlete. And so I sometimes I'm like, yeah, we don't want to be spending long-term in this cycle. And it's also good to feel your feelings. But within that framework, it's like, you better, if you're probing the limits, which is the whole point of this sport, even for someone that's doing 5 miles a week, it's like, you are still probing your limits, and I want to see what happens at 6. And if you see what happens at 6 after you've been doing 5, guess what? You might end up on the sidelines with a Haglund surgery or whatever. God forbid you're doing, you know, big training and then you go up to your first 100 miler. Who knows what might happen? But the whole point of this is that we can experience life through athletics in this setting where the stakes feel quite high, but that is not life and death. And we can put that amount of soul and passion into it. And in that, we gain so much power to understand, you know, our existence, to lift others up in that process. And so my message to people that are worried about setbacks is push to the resistance, push to the setback, then step back slightly. And hopefully you can learn your body to the point that you prevent those, and you can work with your coach to prevent those and understand that. But don't view it as like a judgment on yourself or some mistake. I'm like, that's probably just a sign that you're giving yourself a shot. And if the goal of athletics is to do, hopefully what I did at Leadville too, is to show shooting your shot matters, then shooting your shot in an athletic life is going to be nonlinear. Because if it's not, you're not actually shooting a shot. You know, you're just playing the safe game. And this is not the part of life to play the safe game.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. That is advice I think a lot of people need to hear, and really where we feel feel the most alive when we are pushing those boundaries in that way and seeing what we're capable of.
And it's all about, like, basically this is an act of love for yourself. And I think the flip side of this is that in pushing, you also need to be that source of love, like physically. And so you need to eat enough food always. You need to try to treat your body with the love it deserves as you move through this process. But on the flip side, like, none of this is a choice. Like, I think sometimes athletes are like, well, everything else is a mental decision. Why wouldn't my performance, my injury, my performance, all that? It's like, no, man, you're just playing with the hand you were dealt, doing the best you can. And so the point of shooting your shot is to realize that in shooting shots, you're going to miss, if you're shooting the right shots, you're going to miss way more than you make. And that's what I was doing at Leadville, right? Like, that is going for the course record there, is shooting a shot that realistically, if we ran that race 100 times, I would not make that often, just based on the historical context. And I've missed so many shots before it. But that's the whole point. In learning that, like, the missing is okay, you give yourself permission to keep shooting and apply that to everything in life. It's like, you gotta miss 19 to make the 20th. And I think the cool thing about athletics is, like, the misses feed directly into the makes, but they only do that if you also treat yourself with love on the other side of it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. A beautiful message to leave us with. People can find you, go listen to your podcast, which you've referred to multiple times, Some Work, All Play. Can also find your website, you on social media. Thank you for joining me today, for sharing with us. And just appreciate all you share with the running community. You truly are a gem, and look forward to seeing what's ahead. But I'm not going to ask you what's next, because I know that's the most annoying question in the world. So,
Well, it might actually be appropriate right now, because theoretically I'm going to do another 100-miler in less than a month.
You got the bug. Well, I know what that is if you're saying less than a month.
Yeah.
Can only be one thing, a party in the desert.
A party in the desert. No, we have our second kid on the way, like I said. And I'm like,
you're in a time limit.
Yeah, sometimes shooting your shot means, I feel like there's a temptation actually after this to be serious, that, like, well, I can sit down in this. I mean, I was like, I'm on the Rich Roll podcast. Like, I can just be the guy that did this thing. And I'm like, no, I'm preaching about failure and shooting shots. I need to go fail again so I can really be myself. I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy who has success. I need to be within those 19 failures to know I'm working to this next one. So,
you got to keep that relatability. You don't want people to be like, oh, well, you just get everything right. You don't want to fall in that bucket.
I need to have the vomit spewing before the finish line at this one.
You can tempt fate. We'll see what comes of it. Don't go tempting fate with those nasty cacti. Will get embedded in their bodies. Those are freaky. So we'll probably see you with some of those hanging out with you at Javelina.
Nature's acupuncture.
If you want to call it that. Those things freak me out. But thank you so much for joining me. It has been a joy, as always. Could easily keep going, but I look forward to seeing what's in store, and keep being you. Appreciate you.
You're the best, Tina. Love you all out there. Shoot your shots.
Before we go any further, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Running for Real team. Without them, I would not be able to do barely anything compared to what I'm able to do today. They are behind the scenes. They are there for me. I am just so appreciative of them. To Jeremy Nessel, our podcast editor, audio consultant, and someone who's been with me since the start. To Sally Pontarelli, our content and operations manager, who is there day to day doing all the things to help me be successful. To Kelsey Wang, our head of design, and Louise Murphy, our associate designer. And finally, to Sandy Gutierrez, our photographer and content strategist. I am appreciative of all of you and wouldn't be able to do what I do without you. Wow, I enjoyed that episode so much. And some of those questions, especially the one about coaches, being a coach and what he learned from his athlete and what he was able to take into the race. I love David's optimism. I love the way that he is unapologetically himself and has really come into that. And I think we can all learn from that. So friends, there are lots of links in the show notes. You should definitely go check out his podcast if you have not already. There's links to that, to his social media, and also links to our partners, Tracksmith, Precision, and Runner. You can go to runningforreal.com/episode 419 to get special offers from those brands and links to all that we talked about today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.